Welcome back to The Observation. I am so happy to be back. This week, we will be observing artificial intelligence and the homogeneity of people. We will be talking about Bitcoin's little price rally that we saw and also discussing Hong Kong. I just visited Hong Kong for the very first time, and I'm going to give you my travel tips because I've been traveling a lot and I feel like I can impart some wisdom on the travel game. So let's just start with Hong Kong. First of all, in my last episode, I said I was going to China. I did not mean to conflate Hong Kong with being a part of mainland China, but thank you to the friend who pointed out that error. My intention was not to imply otherwise. I was just sort of trying to say that I've never been to that region of the world before. Why was I in Hong Kong? I was visiting on behalf of my client Trust Machines. I'm the communications partner at Trust Machines, and Trust Machines is building products on top of Bitcoin. So using Bitcoin's blockchain as rails, Bitcoin is the securest network there is. Why not try to experiment with it? And it was really fun. I had a blast, honestly, in Hong Kong. It's hard though coming with the jet lag. I'm going to be really honest. When you get there, it does take some time. And sometimes when you're doing those quick travel situations to Asia, it's tough. I think I probably could only do a few of those trips a year, like maybe 2. Going into Hong Kong, I guess I didn't really know what to expect on the city and the culture, but it was totally different than anything I've experienced. One thing that I thought was really fascinating was just sort of the zoning there. So for example, in New York, you don't see quite mixed use zoning for different properties. So there I would show up to some sort of happy hour event for these ancillary events that they have around the conference. Well, you'd show up and I was so confused. I walked up to one woman, and the older generation doesn't seem to speak English as much. At least this was my observation of being there. And I walked up to one woman and she's like, I don't speak English. I was asked if the hotel that I had showed up at was the right location for this event. I walked around for quite some time until I realized that it was in fact the place, and went up there. And so it's like a bunch of apartments or hotels, and then you get to a restaurant, and then it's more apartments and hotels. Like I went to Carbone and it was just stacked in between a bunch of other random floors. It's very different, but cool because everything is just stacked on top of each other there. Space is very limited. One of my favorite things that happened there was I had a proper Chinese meal, and I'm just retelling this from a friend who told me how everything ran there. This was a little bit more casual, but he was explaining how a Chinese meal is had. And so we were on a circular table, and there is a lazy Susan in the middle where all the food is put out and everyone spins it around. And you have external chopsticks and internal chopsticks. You could use your external chopsticks to pull from the lazy Susan and your internal chopsticks to eat from, almost like a public key, private key in some ways. Anyway, little dad joke. So that was really fun. And there's a person who's always designated at the table that everyone knows is paying the bill and is sort of organizing the event. And then to the left of that person is the person of honor, or the most important person at the table. And then to the right is the second most important person at the table. I was sitting in the second most important person spot, but no one was taking it seriously. And overall, oh my gosh, there was a soup I had that was just unreal. So good. What else? Did I eat anything else that was amazing? I stayed at the Peninsula and I had the French toast, and that was very good. Not that that's like a traditional meal there. I also visited, there is a restaurant called the Aubrey. It's a Japanese restaurant on top of some hotel. And I think there's one in London actually. And so I had to go have a glass of wine there. So I did. I guess I'll just do my travel tips really quickly. My flight to Hong Kong was 16 hours. And that's basically a whole day door to door. So my circadian rhythm was very off. So I have a few travel tips, because if you want to travel at a fast pace, I found there are some ways to do it. You need to invest in an eye mask, because that just masks all the light, and preferably the ones that just hover above your eyes. I bought one. It's a game changer. I even use it when I'm at home and I just need to shut out the light. That can change everything for you. And then if you aren't in a lay flat seat, you can pull the sort of headrest forward for you and lean on each side of that and fall asleep like that. And then I don't like neck pillows because I feel like it pushes my head forward. I just don't do that. I rather just lay on the sides. I would also say always wear long socks and bring a light jacket so that you can use it as a blanket, as you know, sometimes they don't give you a blanket. And bring chapstick, bring some skincare. And then one last thing on Hong Kong, I could not use ChatGPT or TikTok while I was there, and I truly felt like I was in the dark ages because I use both daily. TikTok I shouldn't really be using as much, and it's just a reminder that we are so lucky to have choice for now. I know TikTok has been, potentially it will be going away in the US. We'll see how that plays out, but right now we can use it in the US. We can use TikTok, we can use Bitcoin, and we can use AI. So there's lots of freedom here in terms of technology and for businesses to operate. So that's something I just am grateful for. It did help sort of cut my TikTok addiction a little bit. Let's discuss Bitcoin's price rally. Bitcoin hit 71K early on Tuesday. So this is reaching its highest level since April. I put a tweet out. I think we're microdosing this bull run. It's a slow increase, and I don't think we're going to see retail really getting interested until we hit 100K. Until we're around 100K, I don't think you're going to see the news outlets, you're not going to see traditional media writing about it as much, because we really are just at the same place we were at the top of the last cycle. So what's new here? What's novel for the media to write? I do communications for a living, I do PR. I've seen is just that that's not really of interest to them until something new happens, right? Because this is pretty much the same. 71K is close to 69K. And so we haven't broken out of last cycle. And I think people have felt so weird in this cycle. It's very different than other ones. So we'll be monitoring that. Now let's discuss artificial intelligence and the homogeneity of people. Before we dial into that, a lot has happened in this past week, right? So I wrote this because OpenAI has launched its new chatbot, which is basically like the movie Her, if you've seen it, where Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with Scarlett Johansson's voice. But now we've heard new things from Scarlett Johansson. So Scarlett Johansson has said that basically Sam Altman reached out to her and asked if they could use her voice for their chatbot named Sky. Well, Scarlett Johansson said, no, I don't want you to use it. And he just basically went ahead and used it anyway. So she's gonna get a bag for this for sure. I think they're walking it back at OpenAI. I just how did you think that people were gonna just be okay with this? Like Scarlett Johansson wasn't going to hear the voice and say, just to not hear it, like it wasn't going to get back to her. I just don't understand how she wasn't. What were they thinking? Where's the legal team on this? It's so ridiculous. And am I shocked that an AI company used AI to fake someone's voice, which was basically their voice, so a deep fake of their voice? No, I'm not shocked at all by this news. Let's discuss this chatbot and what's happening over at OpenAI, because it's pretty interesting. We basically are going to be living in the movie Her. And I think for people who are not in the tech space that listen to my podcast, I know there's a lot of women specifically that are afraid of AI and what it could mean for the future. So let's just discuss it. The new capabilities are language, which actually I'm definitely going to use. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to use the language component. Language will help you with live voice translation across languages. So it actually even glitched out in the demos for speaking French, and then it corrected itself and laughed and said, sorry guys, I was having a moment, which is so crazy and perceptive. Like that is how perceptive the AI is. It knows when it's made a mistake, and it can make a joke about it. It can make light of a subject. That's nuts. It also can tell a bedtime story. So, parents, you already had iPads for your kids, but now just let Sky raise them is basically what's going to happen. And you can even ask the AI to change the tone of its voice or make it more dramatic or more robotic. And they even asked it to sing a story. So sing the story that they were reading, and it was able to do that. It can help with interview preparation. I actually find that is beneficial. Not that people will have jobs for I'm just kidding, for much longer. Having a personal assistant, so it can help you with daily tasks. Companionship is one I worry about. I don't know what OpenAI standards are going to be, but eventually AI girlfriends are definitely on the table. Whereas no one's really talking about AI boyfriends, because I don't think women want an AI boyfriend. I think men want an AI girlfriend. That's a whole topic. It can make dad jokes. It had two AIs talking together and singing together and even had them harmonize. It played rock, paper, scissors. It even asked it to be sarcastic, and it was able to do that. So it understands sarcasm. It understands nuance. So what does all that mean? I think the world's really going to be changing quite quickly. I do want to say before this becomes a part of our daily life that just because technology has been introduced does not mean you need to use it. I do think people need to learn about it. And just because technology has been introduced does not mean you need to adopt it into your daily life. Examples of this is TikTok, is dating apps, is AI. I think people should learn about it because it obviously adds value to you and your life. And it's just good to know what's going on and stay abreast of what's happening. It can add value to your life. There's a quote by Professor Richard Baldwin at the Geneva Graduate Institute in Switzerland, and he says AI is not going to replace your job. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to replace your job. Before new technology comes in, we can just take a step back and realize that it doesn't need to change your life, and it doesn't have to, and you do have choice. It's like people are spoon feeding us this stuff. You don't have to eat it. You can just say no to it. But I do think being fearful of it is wrong. It can be scary, but just try to learn about it, because there are some things that might benefit you. It's like when the computer came around. It's like when the fax machine came around. It did speed things up for us. So why am I titling this episode The Homogeneity of People? I'm titling it that because these algorithms and these companies and these centralized institutions are making people more alike. And that's because there is a certain group of people that work at these companies that have certain guidelines that code these computers and these algorithms to influence trends, to influence thought, to influence certain people to speak and others to not. As I have been even traveling around, I realize how much we are becoming similar to each other in different respects. How I've realized this recently is I was in Poland before I went back to New York, and then I was in Hong Kong. And when I was in Poland, I could see this influence of Western culture sort of come out in Poland. Even in Hong Kong, I saw that influence there as well. Even people speaking English across different countries, it feels like the younger generation at least knows English broadly across the world. And in some ways that's good, but in some ways it's bad, because we're losing the things that make us different, but different in preserving our culture. So when I go to Poland, I want to feel like I'm in Poland. I don't want to feel like I'm in California. We're becoming more of the same is something I've been just observing and realizing. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing. Something else I've been thinking about is, will we get to this point where eventually a Neuralink will just be embedded into your head and you won't even have to learn languages? Be able to look at a tree and it will tell you what that means in Spanish or Japanese, and it will even tell your mouth how to move in a certain way to make the sounds that are accustomed to that language. Would that be what happens in the future? Potentially. I'm thinking very much so. And that's scary. That's so scary. I can see why people are afraid. Like, there is good reason to be afraid. Something else I've been thinking about, power used to be so concentrated by governments, and now Silicon Valley is the most powerful place in the world, truly. And this is, again, why everyone is the same, because they have so much power over thought, over attention, over what people are thinking, more than a politician, more than any person in time. You think about leaders of the world that we study in school, none of them had the same amount of reach that an influencer does today on TikTok, that can talk to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people at once, which is just crazy to think about. It's super nuts. Tech has become increasingly more powerful. Some of our elected officials can't even comprehend what's happening. I'm going to talk last on back to Bitcoin's rally. There's politicians now that are getting involved in crypto. The Trump campaign is the first to accept crypto donations, including Dogecoin and Shiba, but also Bitcoin. I just can't imagine giving any of my Bitcoin to a presidential nominee. I'm sorry. I don't know why I would ever donate with my precious Bitcoin to a nominee. It just does not feel like anything I would do. I also hate that Bitcoin is becoming political. It's basically, I understand why the Trump administration is doing this. They have to fight against the Biden administration, but it just feels like the crypto industry is going to be a huge pawn in this election, and I hate feeling like a pawn. I don't like it. I'm just kind of getting the ick overall. My takeaway from all of this is that we really need to fight against everyone pushing AI down our throat. I'm really worried about men and women, especially because I talked about last episode about how the birth rate is declining. And I think men are just going to have all these AI relationships with, basically incels are going to have a lot of relationships with AI. And you'll see sort of like this Darwinism 2.0 where only the strong genes will be meeting out in public. And a lot of women are going to be super lonely. Like, that's what I'm projecting is going to happen. And that's a very scary world to be in. I don't want to sound negative at all on the state of the world, but the world in which OpenAI is running is looking potentially scary. It also is looking helpful in some ways, but you can't sort of choose with technology. You can't really choose how other people can use it. It's sort of just open, and once it's unleashed, it's sort of like Pandora's box and it's out there. There's not really putting it back in the box after that. Those are my thoughts on artificial intelligence and the state of things. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody. If you'd like to sponsor The Observation, you can email me at theobservation@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning into this show. I will be back next week. See you later.